I remember one night coming home and I was like, um, man, I missed my kids. Like they're already in bed and I had two young kids. And I was like, kind of sucks because I'm doing really well professionally, but my wife at the time hates me. My kids, I don't see them as much as I'd like to. I'm probably not very fun to be around because like by the time the weekend rolls around, I'm like, all right, now we're like remodeling a house, building a new house in Park City. So my weekend was tool bags. And I just realized like after it only, I mean, Ben, I'm a very quick learner. All it took was like a divorce and me almost having a nervous breakdown. And then and then and then I started thinking I should probably learn about business because this thing, I actually, created an environment that was hostile because I was the boss and I didn't have a business that could function. I was like, okay, you got a lot of skills, buddy. How can we maximize your productivity? But there wasn't a feedback loop. It's just like, I was getting hallucinating on what needed to happen. And then once I started seeing some of my friends in the industry, I was like, so wait, you have 6 clinics. How do you run 6 clinics? And it was a friend of mine, Brent Dedelich and Steve Peru. And these two doctors are like, I'm going to break your hands. That would be the best thing we could possibly do for you. And I was like, this seems pretty violent. And they're like, no, for real. Like so just imagine you couldn't even like touch a person anymore. And how would you do it differently? And then that's where I started to open up my mind to entrepreneurism. So this is probably like 2007, 2008. And then it was 2009 and 10, probably 2010 is where I was like, all right, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm actually going to create a company that can function and grow. And that was the big turning point.
It's so interesting. I think that a lot of times entrepreneurs, I think let's just back up here for a second. I think that a lot of times there's like these segments, at least that I found in observing entrepreneurs, is that they're operators, and operators are typically people who like create a business because they want to create a new job for themselves, right? And then there are people then who are operators who go, you know what? I think there are maybe different ways for us to continue to grow that maybe doesn't have me doing all the operating. I like the idea of managing, right? And that's what I would
Um,
call like business owners. And then there's this next leap up to entrepreneurs, and it's something that you're starting. It's like interesting listening to your story is that you can see you went from operator starting to move towards like business owner, and then launching into this idea of being like, there's got to be more to this. There has to be more than 60-hour weeks. And I think it's really interesting these some of the misconceptions about what does it mean to be an entrepreneur is that there's more doing.
mm,
And what's interesting as I'm listening to you, I'm starting to hear like these some of these underlying pieces of this is a lot about more thinking, right? Being a little bit more intentional with how you are thinking about the structures you're putting in your life. When you think about your journey from the ranch to concrete to building houses to, meeting and caring for 150 to 200 clients, what are the biggest misconceptions that you came into this world of entrepreneurism that you think you were surprised by in the things that you see as you are dealing with other clinicians, right? Because you are one of the like the experts in the peptide world in longevity health. What are the things that you see from your own journey and that you're actually experiencing when you're observing other entrepreneurs?
well, I think like, you know how in AA or in coach, all progress starts by telling the truth. It's like if you don't admit that you've got so much ambition, it's like a forest fire, right? I mean, it can like a little spark can like burn down a forest if you don't contain it. But if you contain it properly, that little spark can cook your food and it can nourish you and I mean, that was like the first human technology is fires. And so I see it in other entrepreneurs. I work with primarily entrepreneurs because I know them inside and out. It takes one to know one. And and what I see is if they can't contain it, then we think that it requires a higher output. But really, where I've shifted my thinking is where can I find the leverage points? And I think that's where there's two books that were instrumental for me in 2009, 2008, 2009, 2010. And it was The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I read that book and it was like, I could not even imagine at the time. I said, that is crazy. This dude's running a business and he runs it 4 hours a week and he's got all these call centers set up in the Philippines. And I remember when I met Tim Ferriss, I was like, it was 2015. And I was like, dude, you have no idea. I know you way better than you know me. So sorry if this is like creepy. I got a little bromance on you, but your book like changed my life. And then the 4 Hour Body, I started, going deep into that. I must have given it to, 400 or 500 different clients of mine and friends. But it was that book and then the EMIC, you're using some of the terminology a little bit from that book. But when I started realizing I'm just a technician in my own business and I don't have to be. And that took off so much stress because so many entrepreneurs, we identify ourselves as our business. And if it's like something's going wrong in the business, then I feel really shitty about myself. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Ben, but you have a
Yo,
down week and it's like suddenly everything in life just feels like it's caving in on you. And so it's just this, it's this weird cycle of paranoia that I've learned how to manage where it's like, hey man, you have a 20 years track record of success, growth year over year for 20 years. I mean, I think, I think 1 week of having, where things didn't line up the way you wanted, I think you got this.
yes.
It's more like the inner dialogue of questioning some of the irrationality because the emotion comes up because, we inherited it from our parents or who knows where we got it from. But when that emotion comes up, I've learned that the entrepreneurs who have the best conversations with themselves also have the best quality of life, no matter what their business is doing.
Why do you think that entrepreneurs have some of those limiting beliefs, right? Some of these things like, no, I need to be that technician. Like, I need to be that front facing person. I have to be leading from the front and putting the time in. Why do you think that is in the fact that, you know, that the 4 hour work week was so impactful to you? Like, why do you think that more entrepreneurs don't have that aha moment?
Uh, I think, we call it free days and coach. I call it rejuvenation. So, thanks to one of my dear friends, Ben Laws, he gave me this idea. He's like, you need to create a body operating system. So, um, but one of the things in our operating system that rejuvenation is like the most important thing. And we think that money is what's going to rejuvenate us. And we think, okay, all I need to do is, and I've seen this with clients of mine who they've sold their business. They got that massive
Mhm.
paycheck and they are devastated. I mean, because they realize that there's nothing rejuvenating about getting a lot of money in your bank account. Yes, it gives you a momentary sense of freedom and peace, but if they're not taking care of their health along the way, they get burned out. And anytime you're burned out, you're stressed, the decisions you make are what's going to create this environment where you're basically self-sabotaging your own success metrics.
I love that you bring up the self sabotage because I think oftentimes people see the Reagan today and they go, well, he's always had it figured out. Like, he's successful. He's one of the leading experts in the world on peptides. Um, what are the things that you think that you did? Like, what are the top? Let's narrow it down. What are the top three self-sabotaging things that you did that no one probably sees? Right? Everyone sees that you're the greatest 20+ year overnight success, right? But at the end of the day, there were some self-sabotages that like you hit that obviously maybe helped curate in terms of your body operating platform, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But what are the three things that you feel like you self sabotaged yourself most?
Sheesh. Well, um, the good news is I never got deep into drugs or any kind of crazy behaviors like that, which is awesome. So, and I wish I had some better stories, but mine are more the inner dialogue, which is you haven't done enough, you haven't accomplished enough. So that kind of that scarcity. would probably be the number one. The number two is just an overconfidence in my own skills and not depending on other people. Um, I I think we have an amazing team, but I think the biggest place where I found myself uh, scratching my head. Even I mean, I could read Who Not How like 30 times, and it's still like, okay, keep going, buddy. You got yeah, one more time reading this, you're gonna get it. But it's it's just not. It's not just that I don't have a great team around me. It's I have a phenomenal team around me, but it's just the amount of clarity in the conversations and actually having that time to connect with the team in a disarming way. Because what I've learned in my self-sabotaging out of the universe of hard knocks is that if you can put people in a state of collaboration and like where they feel a sense of calm, then like the communication's already there. It's like you don't have to explain things very much if you can change the energy field around you. And that's, kind of what we opened up with, which is I've learned how to trust my gut and my intuition. And if I
Mhm.
deviate from that at all, if I try to think
Mm.
with my brain and like, well, I know how I can really expand this thing. I mean, Ben's those of you who don't know, he's a maximizer. So I have to kind of I have to talk to Ben. Then I'm like, all right, I'm going to take one of the very genius ideas that Ben said, and I'm going to execute on that one thing for a year. And then I'm going to take one more thing because Ben always gives me about 300 great ideas. But it's listening to my gut to say, okay, I'd rather have execute on one great thing than poorly execute on 300 things that just aren't really in the cards at that stage. So I think the three sabotage areas, one coming from a place of scarcity, thinking you're not good enough, you don't add the value that you want to add. There's other people in the field that are way smarter than you or whatever, doing way bigger things. Once you get to know those people, which Ben and I know them intimately, you realize we're all in the same game and we all have the same human brain. Maybe Elon is an alien and there's probably a couple others, but
Yeah.
outside
Yeah.
of that, we're we're human. And then that second one is not having a place where there is a collaborative energy with your team members and like really trusting them and just creating an environment where they can thrive in their own unique ability or their own genius. And then the third is probably the biggest is not trusting your gut. Like when you know that you're forcing something, there's a great
Mm.
book called Power versus Force by David Hawkins. And what he did, he's a phenomenal medical doctor, but he was very in tune with energy. He went through some severe suffering as a child, was very sick. And but what he learned is that there's a vibrational field around us. And I don't mean to get too esoteric,
No, no, this is great.
um, but that vibrational field, if you look at the emotions and where they land in the body, and so if you look at these emotions by like a magnitude of 10, there's a whole scale that he put on. And so you put like unconditional love or complete, like awakening or awareness. That's going to be like in the high, like the thousands, right? And then you go down the scale, and once you get to anger, then you start going in kind of like the downward spiral. And our nervous systems are designed to give us these emotional triggers that lead to really rough behaviors. But fear is down below anger, and then below that is like the shame and guilt, and shame and guilt are like the lowest emotional factors. And I think that's one of the things when I read that book, Power versus Force, it woke me up to the idea that like this shame that I have or the guilt for not like doing enough or being the way that I wanted to be or like having the success that I wanted to have, or disappointing people. I was like, that actually doesn't serve me and it makes me sick. And we can actually measure that. We can see it in people's labs who carried those emotions. And yeah, there's certainly some evidence. If you read some of the work of Candace Pert, Molecules of Emotion, you can see how those lead to chronic disease, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all the things that kill us. But if you feel that sense of anger, then you're right on the precipice of like just having courage. And so courage is like that big breakthrough. And it's sort of like the 4 C's that Dan talks about. And that's one reason in 2015, when I got into coach, I was like, oh, this dude, Dan, he knows power versus force.
Yes.
Then if you work with Daniel White, then you're like, okay, well, Dan's been working with Daniel and looking at energy fields, and then he's put systems and structures in place for it. It's one reason I resonated with him, but it's that courage that's the breakthrough emotion.
It's so interesting that you talk about these energies, these vibrational frequencies, and the more and more that I've been in the entrepreneurial world, coaching entrepreneurs, is that it everything comes back to that this is an energy game, right? And that you have complete agency. And I love that this book. Thank you for that book recommendation and such a great articulation of what the underlying sort of thesis is in there. For those of you listeners who don't know, when we refer to coach, that's a strategic coach, which was created by Dan Sullivan and his partner Babs Smith. It is the foremost entrepreneur coaching program in the world. Over 40,000 entrepreneurs have gone through there. Absolute game changer, which is actually where Regan and I met almost 9.5, almost 10 years ago. And so, but I think going back to these frequencies, did you ever watch the movie Reagan? What the bleep?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Such a good movie.
And in there, there's a part where they actually show that these feelings that you're talking about, like when you have like love down to like murder, they show they show what happens to a water molecule. And for whatever reason, it seems to be the Japanese are capturing all of this stuff. And maybe it's I'm sure you have an explanation for that. But I found that really, really interesting. And then recently, I saw uh, on Instagram, of all places, this new Japanese study that talked about in terms of frequencies. And in this clip, they uh, they had a person had, I think it was like 570 hertz, like a tuning fork was hitting it, and then right next on anchored on a table was a 440 hertz tuning fork that had uh, a ping pong ball on a string connected right next to it, and it showed them hitting the actual tuning fork, and nothing happened. And then he switched over to a 440 hertz in his hand. He's standing probably a good 3-4 feet away, and he hits the tuning fork, and all of a sudden that tuning fork starts to vibrate, and it's about 3 or 4 feet away, and the ping pong ball starts to kind of like, because it's right next to it, touching it, it starts kind of bouncing around. He hits it again, and the ping pong ball like jumps away from the tuning fork.
Mm.
And I think that that's so interesting to me that uh that you hop that you were really drawn to that early on and starting to understand that this is an energy game, it's a frequency game. And I think for all of you entrepreneurs who are listening, you are like the adage, you are the 5 people you spend the most time around. I think if you reallocate that to you are the 5 energies you spend the most time around, right?
Ooh, yeah, yes.
And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Reagan? I mean, obviously you got 20 years of treating patients. You see it in their blood, you see it like with like you have the bona fides. How would you describe that? And what if you were talking to entrepreneurs? What are the things that you should think they should be looking at?
Well, I think it's fascinating though. Just back to the hertz real quick, because if you're in tune, we think it's just like some kind of phrase, but you think of everything in on the planet, it's frequencies, right? Like you
Yes.
and I, we're connected. And you're in Wisconsin, I'm in Utah, but it's like we're right here in the same room. How does that happen? It's just through frequencies.
Yes.
And we make it sound so esoteric, but it's really not. And even the hertz, like 440, 432 is like this beautiful hertz for healing the entire body and whole body rejuvenation. And then as you go higher up in the hertz, like, when you're in the 500s, you're more in the chest and the heart. And then by the time you get to the 900s, you're in kind of the third eye, the cerebral realm. And so if you don't believe like what Ben and I are talking about, all you have to do is like look up a YouTube channel called The Power of You. And it's just got these frequencies in it. And you can put that up, put headphones on because you're getting just like they had the 440 hertz and then the 530. 32. I can't remember what you said exactly, but you're going to have different hertz in each ear, and it harmonizes your brainwaves. And so it's rejuvenation. So if an entrepreneur does that, then all of that static that you pick up from people around you who may not be tuned in, you've gotta protect your energy first and foremost. And so when you're around people that drain your energy, or when you feel like you have to defend yourself all the time, or you feel like you're forcing things, then it's not just looking at yourself. That's the first thing, but then you also need to survey everyone around you. And that's what I was kind of alluding to on that teamwork thing. Is it's not so much about like how clear can I give the expectations and the marching orders. It's how clean can my energy be so that they feel safe to have clean energy themselves. And and that's where you nailed it, like with the people you hang around with. Um, uh, and you and I have seen it. We've had to leave a lot of relationships in the past so that we can move
Yes.
on. And it's like some people are just unwilling to take that vibration just a little higher, and they're unwilling to peel back some layers so that they can really be as dynamic as a human as they could be. And I think that's the real key is yes, the 5 people, but it's also the energy that you can be around 500 people and you can say, sorry, Dunbar's number doesn't apply to me. 150, that's boring. Ben taught me to maximize. And it's like, I could be connected to 5,000 people because you've got the frequency, and that then it's this mutual exchange of energy and love. And that's where Ben, you could go in any room, and I guarantee if you guys have never been around Ben in person, he's somebody who will take a frequency and just slowly leverage it up and leverage it up. At the last coaching event, Ben's one of my coaches too, and he's talking about attitude. And I want you to like phrase this perfectly, because you gave such a beautiful definition of what attitude is. It's like the ability to manage your emotions, or to transform your emotions. Do you remember that definition, what you said?
I think it's the agency to have control over your emotions.
Yeah,
I think it
that's
was some
it.
Yep,
Beautiful. That's it.
what I love about all of this is that, everything that you and I are talking about is 100% free.
Yeah.
It is 100% free. Who you decide to hang out with, what books you read, what podcasts you listen to, what sort of medical advice, which I know you and I are gonna talk a little bit about what you're currently working on now. It's 100% in your age. It is agency, and I think
Boom.
there's something that's so empowering about this. Kind of closing out your chapter of where you've gotten to today. You kind of hinted at a bunch of these things in terms of what were the three, things that sabotage. If you could go talk to your younger self, which by the way, your younger self represents so many entrepreneurs, right? Because whether you've taken a company from 1 million to 4 million, 10 million to 100 million, what I'm finding is that we all are these versions of ourselves that can learn from things that, in terms of maybe someone else's 20 years ago or 10 years ago, sabotages. And because I've become distinctly aware that we all are living a narrative that some of us have yet to live, right? But some of us might be farther ahead, but they skip chapter 2, and
Yep.
and then they run into a wall and they come back and they gotta redo chapter 2. What are the 3 things that you think that, you would tell yourself and or the people who are listening to this? Like, what would you do now to help you shortcut to where you are today?
I would have um, probably told myself to build systems from a business perspective. I'd say, all right, build systems that aren't dependent on your skill. And then I would maximize the skill that I already had. I cultivated in my teens and early 20s, which is speaking. And I would just say, okay, you focus on getting in front of a lot of people because it gives me energy, it adds value, and instead of being so one on one. So just start looking. I mentioned the word leverage before, but I would just say, hey, you have a really good message. Like, you have I believe the message that I have about health is the most powerful message anyone can hear. If it helps them, motivate them to think differently about the way that they're treating themselves, from a physical and emotional and all the things, from a longevity perspective, health span perspective. I would just say find the leverage points and work really hard at getting as many of those leverage points built up over time, and don't worry about the the overall number yet. The outcome will be far greater. It's like the Kaizen principle in since we're talking on the kind of the Japanese culture. Um, Kaizen is like just those small things that yield massive amounts of leverage. And I would have put more energy and creativity around those instead of energy and creativity to just keep doing the same process over and over again, because I knew that process worked, but it only worked if it was Reagan with an individual. And now, looking back, I was like, man, I would be helping 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times the people if I would have done that in the beginning instead of do what I did for the first decade.
How much should ego play into that delay? Because I think if we're all telling the truth here in terms of to I feel like where you and I have had similar journeys in this, that um, it feels really good to be needed.
Hmm.
Feels
Yep.
really good to hear that one-on-one applause. Can you talk a little bit about your journey in that?
Ego, you can look at the ego as like that's the voice in your head that tells you you can't do it, you're not good enough. And so it's not just ego like, hey, look at me and I did better than this guy. I don't think that's been a huge problem of mine. It's always been like you can do better, you got to work harder. And then I think probably the biggest impediment was my dad, when I was like, "Hey, I don't wanna be like an MD. I'm not gonna go into like conventional medical school. I'm gonna go study like acupuncture and Eastern medicine." And then, the school's got this cool Western medicine program, and we have all these professors coming in. And my dad was like, "All right, well, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back to carpentry." And that probably was when I think about ego, that was probably the biggest thing that was also like a huge motivator. I'm just like, oh, to hell with that. Like it's going to be successful, even if I'm like kill myself doing it. And then I did. I mean, I literally like just disassembled all the beautiful things that I had in my life. And then I had to, reemerge and build everything back up again. But yeah, I think ego is ego's always the killer, I think.
It is. There's the one that keeps you because of overconfidence, and then there's the other side of that and the fact of underconfidence, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you said, I think that it's really important that the audience hears is that you said, I think I have one of the most compelling ways of articulating medicine and how it impacts you and to be able to get the most out of your life. And it's one of the reasons why I started working with you. Come across a bunch of different longevity, wellness, whatever the moniker you want to put in front of that type of doctors. And I think the thing that is super exciting to me is that you've created some systems and structures that you have either through yourself, you've observed, that have created like the greatest clarity I have at a cellular level. And that has unlocked so much for me. But so can you share with the audience what are you currently working on? What are you currently really excited about? That you're looking forward to either sharing either today and or what you're currently sharing with your clients now.
Well, I appreciate it. Always an honor to be able to work with you, Ben. And that's I think the biggest thing. If we talked about a recent win, you talked about what the bleep. You remember the Secret, that movie, and
Yes.
Law of all those kind of cool things in the early 2000s. Well, Jack Canfield, who's always been kind of a hero of mine, I'm in his TLC group, and I was just there in Mexico again, and I saw him in July, and he's like, I want to be on your program, and I was just on his podcast, so he's talked about it publicly, so I'm not violating anything, but he's like been one of my childhood heroes, like since I was a teenager, Chicken Soup for the Soul. And just being able to see the transformation. He just turned 80 in August, and he looks so good. He's like, it was so fun being in that community with him. Cy Wakeman was
Wow.
there. Speaking of ego, no ego.
Yeah.
There's just like all these cool people who they've been my heroes. And now that I can, in exchange, like help them find their health and their path. And everyone kept coming up to me. He's worked with everybody, and you've been able to help him. I'm like, I haven't really didn't do much, you know. I just he works directly with Tasha, but I put his protocol together up front. But that's I guess that is where you have those little wins, and it's like, okay, this message needs to get out because we're doing really amazing things.
What are you doing that's I'm not gonna say different, because I think that anyone who's talking about longevity, wellness, you know what, they are, like, doing the world an incredible service, right? But what do you think that is really resonating? You know, we're talking about frequencies before. Like, what are you doing that's really resonating? You know, how I mean, is it a different system? Do you think about it differently than others? Are you articulating it differently? Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I think it's so funny because I was training with the medical team, and we always go first principles thinking, and it just seems to be so helpful using the Socratic method of breaking things down into the smallest fundamental pieces and getting into the root cause. And then before you ever make a decision, it's like you got to clarify what's really where's the friction, where's the constraint, what are the interferences going on in this person's body, what have they tried in the past that doesn't work, why didn't it work, and just asking like two or three more questions. It creates so much leverage. I mean, speaking of that word, and so I think the thing that we do different is it's not that we run more diagnostics than anyone else, and it's not that we do all the crazy stuff. I mean, people bring their labs over from other companies, and we can interpret those. But just by looking at the data, we found that there's three or four labs that are really crucial, like the stool test, which everybody loves, the blood test, the metabolomics, doing some on like the VO2 max, carotid artery. Um, those things are powerful, but it's the questions that you ask that really lead to the results. And if you don't ask those questions up front and you take somebody on a journey without having clarity, then you miss out on a lot. I think that's where most people in medicine, what I've realized is we're all trained to take things at face value, get the diagnosis, execute on the treatment plan. And so we say, okay, I'm gonna think about my thinking here, and I'm gonna look at these labs and ask questions just a little deeper. So that's probably the most important thing.
I think that that is something that I found to personally be really true. You know, I have a history of heart disease in my family, and oftentimes it's been just like, well, that's just what it's going to be. And Reagan, your list of questions that I mean, it wasn't overnight. Rome wasn't built overnight, but it was definitely something that allowed me, quite frankly, uh, I credit you with basically probably saving my life at an age where when I say saving my life at not having a cardiac event at an age where everyone else in my family has had one, and because of those questions. And so, can you talk a little bit about the ageless operating system? Because
Yeah,
I think that's super important. That I think is something also that's different. Um, and I think that was something that was super important to me. I didn't want programs. I wanted something that I could actually buy into that was going to be with me for the rest of my life. And I think that so often medicine is very much you have a problem, you go, they give you a solution, right?
yep,
You know, you have an ideal of I want to just be younger or I want to be more muscled, right? These are outcome like these are just like these very specific outcome based. And I think your ageless operating system, I think is incredibly unique and something that I don't actually see anywhere else.
yeah.
Can you share that?
Well, yes, and once again, I appreciate you saying, "Hey, we need like an operating system," and I was like, "That is, it's so cool when you frame it that way." Um, but in the operating system, if you just look at the way that things flow, first of all, if you know where you want to go, if you have a vision for your future, so what do you want to accomplish in your health in the next month, in the next 6 months, in the next year, in the next 3 years, in the next 10 years? Because one of our mottos is your next decade's your best decade. So that there's never that marginal decade that Peter Attia talks about where everything just falls off a cliff. And so everything goes through that lens where it's like, future focused. I don't want Ben watching Netflix all day. It's just not, you're actually too talented for that, right? But
Yeah.
um, but if you look at it through that and you say, okay, well, what's going to get in the way? And so, once you've clarified where you want to go and you've got the vision in place, now you got to diagnose. You need to figure out, okay, what's going on. And so we ran very particular labs for you to determine what could get in the way of your future health based on your family history. We also looked at, your current goals. I looked at, Ben's just like this Ferrari. I was like, oh, dude, you're a sprinter in college and he's a singer. I mean, he's got so many talents, and it's like, cool. Well, let's bring some of that past energy into the present moment, and let's get Ben sprinting again. Let's get him doing the things that he loves to do. And then that will help him build that framework for the 10-year future. And so once you've got the right diagnostics, and then you can build a treatment plan, and that's what we call prediction. So if you can predict where you want someone to go or where they want to go, it doesn't matter where I want you to go, it's where you want to go. And I can predict based on the diagnostics and based on the clarity that we have together, I can predict certain treatments and the different lifestyle activities that are going to really help you get there. And that's where, we brought in my wife, and she's been doing our Pilates videos for you. That was a brilliant idea. Another one, Ben's been doing Pilates Purgatory, and that's part of the predictive space in your operating system.
Yeah, a subtle shout out to Hive House Pilates. If you want to change your game physically, Hive House Pilates. You may hate me at first, but you will thank me later. It
True story.
I think it's interesting. We're talking about frequencies and energies, and I think that you just said something interesting, like my past. And oftentimes when people hear the word past, is they think, well, that's the past and you can't have it again. And I think you've changed my frequencies around the fact that the past is just literally a mere label of things that, in terms of, I haven't actually allowed my frequency to be adjusted. And you've adjusted that to that these past, what has been historically been called the past, is actually something that is the present and future.
Mm.
And so absolutely love that. I want to transition here, Regan. Um, One of the things in doing this podcast is that I wanted to dive into a couple different areas that so often I don't hear in other podcasts, and specifically around health, wealth, and wisdom. And so I kind of want to cordon this off and actually understand, what are you actually doing, right? So I'm going to start with health, right? Because you are in this area. And so often, I think that, at least I've observed, when people are talking to you, usually around dinner, and being like, so Regan, what are you doing? Do you actually do these things? And so, Regan, talk to me a little bit about, what's your health routine? Like, what's a normal day? What's a normal week? How are you eating? How are you moving?
Man, well, I start my day with a Mountain Dew and a bag of Cheetos, and then uh,
I
no,
I I I see I see you go with the "do as I say, not as I do" approach. I
yeah,
appreciate that.
right, yeah, no, I I think that if I look at my health routine, I think of my body as a laboratory. Like, I'm experimenting on different things, using different peptides. I've done stem cell treatments that were still in clinical trials, and no one had done it outside of the clinical trials. I'm like, I'm going to try it. We don't have time to wait for all the science to come. If I know it's safe, I'm usually not super reckless, but I do have my core essentials, and that's where, like, cold plunge, heat, like doing something hard every day. It's called hormesis, and hormesis is where you intentionally take your body out of its homeostatic place. Because so many people, we live in such a society of comfort. We have food whenever we want it. We can set the temperature. We can be indoors all day. But I like to get outside. I like to do something hard at least once a day. And so I have my systems, my protocols built up for that. I exercise every day in one fashion or another, and I haven't missed a day in like 12 years. Um, and and so I think I kind of put it through that framework, but then every year I have a new habit that I'm trying to put into place. So this year has been all VO2 max related. And The only time my experiment went really bad is, this summer when I was like, "No, I got a 9-mile run and I'm gonna," I was, keeping at a certain cadence, but I had a meeting and I couldn't get out until, like, noon, and so I gave myself, heat exhaustion, and then got on a plane the next day, went to Mexico, and my immune system was wrecked, and so I think I brought back every parasite that existed in Mexico, in
Okay.
August. S so, but otherwise, my experiments usually go well. So I think looking at health from um, what do you enjoy the most as far as activities go, and then I have different milestones that I give myself where I'm competing against my past times, like mountain biking. I see what runs I can ski and feel confident on, or snowboard. How much enjoyment I have in my physical body. I think that's some of the major things I look for, when it comes to health.
I love that. Can you share, where do you struggle? Because I think everyone assumes, well, Regan, you're in the health world, you must do everything absolutely perfect. But you and I, we've offline had conversations. Can you share, where do you struggle? Like, what are your current struggles when you think about your own longevity, your own health span? Uh, what does that look like?
That's a good question because I think the biggest area is just not having time between the things. It's just like activity after activity after activity, or appointment after appointment after appointment, because you and I both have really big ambitions, and we're like, and people depend on us, and they know they can get quick answers and they guidance. And so I think the biggest area is not having time to eat, to urinate some days, to um, to get back to people. I think all of the problems are self-created, based on still this overwhelming need that I have to be all things to all people.
I think that's I think that's a pretty fair answer. And I think that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast probably suffer some from the same thing. Entrepreneurs, more is something that is just hardwired in. I think
Hmm.
it truly is. And so I appreciate that. People are listening to this. What are the three things that you would say, hey, if you do these three things in the next 90 days, in this next week, this is going to have the greatest impact? And greatest impact I derive as like, this is going to have a continual 1% improvement in your life.
Mm. Well, I think thing number one is you set an alarm to go to bed. So make it more intentional your nighttime routine. Dim your lights, go to bed on time. So sleep hygiene would be probably number one.
Okay.
Number two would be hydration. So make sure you're staying hydrated throughout the day, because when you're hydrated, you make better decisions, your brain works better. And then number three would just be to do something hard every day, just like I talked about. Exercise, move your body, have a difficult conversation, like hug people more if that's hard for you. It's so good for you to get oxytocin. I mean, just like connection with other people is really hard for us, especially you intellectual, cerebral types. It's phenomenal what it does to your brain when you just hug people, and more importantly, what it does to them and how much more connected they'll feel.
I love that. Sleep advisement, any recommended amount of sleep that you would say?
I think, if you track your sleep, you just want to be looking for like 3 to 4 hours of what's called restorative sleep. So in REM sleep or deep sleep, that's kind of the gold standard. And then 6.5 to 8.5 hours seems to be pretty good for most people. Um, but I would make sure that you've got a good 8 hours carved out, 8.5, where you're just in bed.
That's really interesting that that you have the REM focus in there. I think that's interesting. I've heard just sort of the glib, you need 8 hours of sleep, and I like that you had that other nuance. Ounces of water. When you say drink water, I mean, is that like, hey, I have 2 Yetis full of water? Is it, or is it more like, hey, let's be a little bit more prescriptive about this? Like, how is there like a prescribed that you would say, hey, if you had this amount of ounces per day, this would be optimal?
Yeah, and it depends on the kind of water, where you live, if you're in the desert, what time of year it is, how much you exercise that day, but generally about half your body weight in ounces. And then, it's really easy if you put apple cider vinegar, some cranberry juice, some lemon. You can even use a little sparkling water occasionally for your nighttime cocktail. And without alcohol, but virgin cocktail. Um, but it's really good to just, um, you know, get some, not just water alone, but put some electrolytes, put some, apple cider vinegar, cranberry juice, but roughly half your body weight in ounces, will get you where you wanna go.
That's fantastic. All right, now let's go back into wealth. And again, disclaimer, it's not a recommendation. Like check your professionals, your financial professionals, before you take anything that we talk about here as advice. But Reagan, one of the things I noticed that in the entrepreneurial world, we rarely talk about how are we building wealth. What does even wealth even mean to each of us? And it's really interesting when you start to crack into it with entrepreneurs and especially some of our friends. It's a little bit different. Like the nuance is different. And so, can you share with me and the audience what does wealth mean to you, and how do you think about building that? Especially because you have a company, you're building companies, you're wanting to build more companies. What does it mean to you?
Right? Wealth is being able to, enjoy life the way that you want to enjoy it because you have the resources to enjoy life. And when I say resources, it's far beyond money, right? I mean, a lot of us, we just think all wealth is about is having this perpetual flow of perennial income and it never goes away. And yeah, I think that's part of it. It's good because, it's freedom. But resources like energy, I look at the amount of energy that someone generates and the amount of energy I generate. I'm like, I'm wealthy today. I'm the richest dude on the block. Usually, I'm not in this neighborhood from a financial perspective, but from a health perspective. That's how I look at it: is energy generation. But I also look at it from energy generation comes from those bigger projects, the bigger impact that you're making on society at large. It's wealth is when you can go in and you can make a difference in people's lives in a positive way. I mean, even, being in the 16 days board, like, I'm like, "Okay, cool. We just got, one of the dude who sits on the board for St. Mark's Hospital. He's coming into the office, we got and so we're gonna have some good conversations there, but just those kinds of things, that is wealth to me, is having a network that can help other people reach their vision and finding other visions that align and bringing your capabilities in. And then I also look at wealth as a function of deeper relationships. From a spiritual relationship. However you look at your spiritual identity, whether it's Christian, Buddhist, Hindu. I love them all. I think they're all just phenomenal and beautiful, and so I think, wealth to me is being able to breathe and tap into a higher power at any time, at any given moment, and just feel ultimately connected to that higher source. And that's probably the greatest source of wealth, for me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Every time I ask this question, it's so interesting. I keep expecting people to go into, well, financially, this is what I think. Like I'm saving X, Y, Z, and it's so often that outside of the entrepreneurial world, that is actually the conversation we go to. And it's like once I have this, then I can actually start building that. And it's so interesting that you're building this wealth network, like this wealth capability, and uh, it seems to me, or maybe, well, I'm going to make an assumption. Do you feel that the financial money side of it just is a natural outcome of doing that?
It's
That it actually
it's
builds the man-made wealth?
Yeah, I think it's just a byproduct, right? It's not the thing that we do, um, but it's a great byproduct when you do things great. Like that's the reward, and it allows us to keep doing more of what is, useful and beneficial.
You feel that the audience could do when they think about building their own wealth network, right? Or their own
Mm.
wealth capabilities? What are the 3 things that you would tell the audience, that you would recommend that they do tomorrow, this weekend? this quarter?
Oh, man. Well, I would just look at the, what do you have in your business? What are the skills and the capabilities you have? And just think like, how could that align with somebody else? Like one of the best things I did, like in 2011, when I decided I'm going to become an entrepreneur, I aligned myself with a company called Parker Hannifin. They're Fortune 100 company, 60,000 employees, and they had this wellness program and they paid for all the alternative medicine out of a totally separate fund because they're making airplane parts and gaskets and pretty toxic material, and they wanted to take care of their employees. And so I was like, well, I have the capability, and I'm going to go and help them. And so I just got in touch with them, and I went to all the different facilities throughout the United States, and it was great for them and great for us.
That's fantastic. All right, let's talk about wisdom. You know, so much of where you and I are at right now is on the shoulders of other giants, right? Whether it's podcasts, it's books, it's technology, it's mentoring. What are the 3 to 5 most impactful things? And again, to be clear, not just in your entrepreneurial life, but personally about who you are, right? Because let's face it, who you are personally is who shows up professionally. What are the things that you have found, or people, books, technologies that you found to be most impactful as you think about your wisdom journey?
I think there's no doubt that the book I've read more than any other book, excuse me, is the Tao Te Ching. It's a book that's been published almost as much as the Bible, and it's just a book.
Really?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's 81 verses, written by Lao Tzu, and it's just like timeless wisdom, written over 2,500 years ago. And I just love that book because it reminds me of the natural way of life. And so there's feminine energy, there's masculine energy, there's yin, there's yang, there's the one thing. And then the one becomes the two becomes the three. And then from the three, we get 10,000 things, which is an expression of how everything multiplies in life. And so it actually being written that long ago, and the fact that I'm reading it today and I can read it again and again and again and get some new insight out of it. That's a big source of wisdom. I think the other source of wisdom is just like really recognizing that no matter what conversation I'm in or no matter who I'm around, they've got so much to share. Like my wife has an enormous amount of wisdom, and her wisdom is so much different than the way I show up on the world. And our wives, Ben and I's wives, are like very similar in a creepy way almost, but they're same slippers and stuff like that. But
It
um,
it it is. It is relatively uh so coincidental.
yeah, but the wisdom our ladies give us. I mean, I would say, Jess and just raising kids. It's been the thing that has helped me gain a better appreciation for what it's like to be a dad, a husband, how it is to be in a family dynamic that's not always easy. But I think that's learning from other people that are close to me is the present day wisdom that I really enjoy.
Yeah, what's one thing that you wish people knew about you that don't?
I think that I just wish that people realize like I actually love just being friends, and if people feel like they need like, hey, how can I like feel more comfortable in this group, or how can I like access, like I know you're this person. Like I actually really enjoyed just helping people feel like they're at home. And so I hope that everyone, whoever, you know, if you ever like think about having a conversation with me, I hope I make you feel really good about yourself and life. And even if you're about ready to go off a cliff, like you and I were when we were in the blizzard, it's just like, um, yeah, I do want to make people feel at home when they're around me.
Yeah, that story's for podcast 100. So,
Wait around.
wait around. Cliffhanger. When you think about wisdom, Lee Brower says, knowledge, I believe this is what he said. Lee Brower, a peer, a friend. He said that knowledge is a pond, wisdom is a river, right? And so often people are looking to accumulate the knowledge versus the being present where your feet are at, where the wisdom is at. Uh, when you think about what are three actions that someone today could go to expand uh, their wisdom, right? To be more in that river.
Man. Number one is self-constraint. So just like don't do it. So learn what you don't want to do. Number two is do the things that you say you're going to do and do them on time. And then thing number three is cultivate deeper relationships by doing thing number one and thing number two.
Fair and Warren Buffety, pay attention to rule number one. That's rule number two. I love that. And going back to what we started this whole conversation, agency, right? These are all things of agency. Um, Regan, I think in closing, what's your next 10x leap, right? You've gone from in terms of you as an operator and building then this business and as an entrepreneur, it's so neat to see you, all these podcasts, you're traveling the world and bringing peptides and this ageless operating system to so many people. What's the next 10x leap that you see for yourself?
Well, I think in the United States, there's so many people who are struggling with chronic disease. They don't know where to turn. That premature mortality. So it's like, yeah, we have extended our lifespan to certain degrees. If you remove like suicides, actually our life expectancy is not bad in the United States. It's not as bad as we thought it was, but our health span is not aligned with this. So my next 10x move is aligning health span with lifespan in the United States, and then bringing that over to Europe as well. But that's where like the new administration, we're doing some Make America Healthy again. And we just did 4 documentaries on that.
Oh,
And I think,
fantastic.
yeah, I think we'll see, that will be the 10X move, is just helping people understand it's not as hard as they think to get where they want to go in their health.
And if people want to find you, how do they link up with you? Like, what's your socials? How can they find you? If people are intrigued by what we talked about and go, I need what Reagan's talking about in my life. I want I want a health span that doesn't allow me to keep my past my past. I can actually bring things that I loved about my past into my present and future. Where do they find you?
Agelessfuture.com, and everything's there. They can find Regan Archibald on LinkedIn. And it's pretty easy to get in touch with us from there.
All right, sir. Hey, what's your closing thought? You get the last word.
Um, I'm going to butcher the quote, but old friends are like silver, new friends are like gold. And so thanks for being like gold in my life, Ben. You're just amazing. So keep up the great work. MaxLife is, just so you guys know, like just the expression of it alone is so powerful, because if you can live the life of your dreams and the maximum life, like find people like Ben and connect with them, and you'll grow together much faster.
Well, that's very kind of you, and I feel incredibly wealthy and gold with your friendship as well. Thanks for being here. Loved having you on the pod, and we'll have to have you back in the future.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.